So Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days Collection is finally out, and I am not surprised to say, although I am disappointed to say, I wish that wasn't the case, but it didn't do so well. It's getting a lot of mixed responses and the sales haven't been that great. It's kind of sad for me because I had just recently made a video talking about how I believe Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs new RPG games. That's something I feel like we've been starved of for a while now. And what makes me really sad about this game not having done too well is that I think that, that's probably going to prevent Konami from doing anything like this in the future. That's probably signaling to them that the interest is just not there. And that really couldn't be further from the truth. The problem is that Konami doesn't understand their original player base. They don't understand what the OG players really want. I'm really sad to say this because I genuinely wanted this game to succeed, but, there's a reason I didn't buy it, and I'm not gonna buy it, and let's just talk about that. There's a few different reasons for this, but I'm just going to start with what I think is the most egregious. I think that this collection is very lazy on Konami's part. Konami doesn't seem to have any real respect for their original player base. They seem to think that just by re-releasing a game that was popular or maybe even semi-popular many years ago, that alone is going to sell. No real effort needs to be put into it. There is no reskin of the game that's necessary or a true remaster or changing of certain things that sucked about some of those older games. They seem to think that they can just re-release old stuff and everybody's gonna buy it, but the truth is that most of us, we're not waiting for Konami to re-release this. We've probably been emulating these games for many years. You have to be aware of that, and if you're gonna re-release some of these games, first of all, pick the actual good games. There's a lot of games that should be there that are not in the collection, but if you're gonna do it, you need to do more than just re-release them. If you're gonna remaster and re-release some of these games as a new thing, surprise, surprise, you gotta put actual effort into it. You can't expect just to release the same game again and hope that people will buy it without putting any effort and calling it a remaster. I looked at what these games look like, and they're very similar, if not virtually identical, to their original predecessors. They don't really look remastered. Even for me, somebody that is a huge fan of the original Duel Monsters era of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm clearly the target audience, right? I love these older games. Even me, I did not enjoy this. I'm not gonna buy it. And the reason for that is because it pretty much looks just like the way it did originally. So why would I spend my money on it? The problem I had with some of these older original games was the way that they looked already at that time. Something that I really don't like about older Yu-Gi-Oh! Games, and maybe that's just me, but it's something that the reason probably why I like more the Tag Force series and other games that were later released for Yu-Gi-Oh!, not these really old ones, are things like not following the Yu-Gi-Oh! That we know and their rules. And not only that, because there are plenty of games that don't use the original TCG rules or whatever, and they have their own set of rules. They just use the Yu-Gi-Oh! IP, and they're great games. A couple of examples that right off the bat just come to mind are Duelist of the Roses and Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Dice Monsters, which is actually in the collection, and that game I actually like. But there are other games that I can think of that, use the IP but don't follow the rules of the TCG or are an entirely different game in general. Like I can think of GameCube's Falsebound Kingdom is the next one I think of. And these are all games that I think are great and I have very fond memories of, and they don't follow the rules of the game, but they're pretty good. They just use the IP. That's totally fine. The problem with some of these games though is that they're not transformative enough to justify being so close to the actual game but just not following any of the rules. That's what a lot of people are just not into. Or for example, they have rules that resemble something like Pokemon, where a light monster has a disadvantage against a dark monster or something like that, and even though it has less or more attack points, it will die regardless. And maybe at the time, some of these games were cool, because I remember playing some of these games, particularly on the PS1, I think I played one of these games. I don't remember which one. I think it's Forbidden Memories, I think it is. And at that time, when I was a little kid and I had no idea how Yu-Gi-Oh! Worked, yeah, I did enjoy the game at that time. But nowadays, it would just be not only too dated, but it's not really what I'm looking for on a old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. The other thing that I don't miss at all, and I really never liked about these older games, is the way that the cards are displayed. It's very hard to understand what you have on the board and your enemy because the display sucks so bad. Like the actual card has no artwork, and it's very hard to play the game that way because you can't tell what's on the board. You have to individually hover over every single card to remember what's actually being played. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll just show it to you really quick. What I mean is that if you play a card, you can't see the artwork of the card or the name without actually hovering over it and reading it. From a visual perspective, it's really annoying and hard to play this game for that reason. Maybe back in the day when I was a little kid, I could look past that, but now as an adult, it's just dull. The board pretty much looks like a bunch of squares with no artwork, and it's hard to play the game. It's obnoxious. You have to keep hovering over every single card to see what's being played. I never liked that, and I still don't. Oh, but it's a loyal remaster of the original game. Isn't that what you like? Aren't you happy? No, I never asked for that. I don't think anybody asked for that. If I wanted to play a game that looked exactly the same as the original games, I would just emulate it, right? The whole point of a remaster is to remaster it and make it a little bit better. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with re-releasing these games, but I would expect some modernization to them. If you're gonna remaster games that are so old where you can't even see what's being played, maybe the first step is make the game legible. Second of all, if you're gonna do this, at least don't forget to include some of the best games of that era, like Where is Nightmare Troubadour? Why is that not in the game? That's an obvious pick. Not following the rules of the TCG and actually not having proper display for the cards has always been and will always be a huge turnoff for me for some of these games, which is why I gravitate to Tag Force. It just feels so lazy to me. Like, let me just re-release the exact same game and not put any effort into it and expect that people will give me their money. It's just, it shows a lack of respect in my opinion. I've been saying this for years. It seems that Konami not only doesn't understand, but they don't respect at all their original player base. Oh, but the old school players of the game are always complaining that Konami doesn't support them and, they're actually giving you something that's old school. It's what you asked for. Why don't you like it? At least for me, in my opinion and how I feel, it has nothing to do with being stuck in some sort of time period of my childhood. I'm not trying to recapture that per se. I think that a lot of people, including Konami, seem to think that the original or old school players of the game or people that have nostalgia or miss the older original game or some, era of the game like GX or 5Ds, they seem to think that it's exclusively nostalgia and it's just like we want to recapture our childhood, right? We want to relive those same games in that childhood, and that's not really it for me. I can only speak for myself here, but at least for me, and I would think that I'm the poster child target audience for this type of collection, right? Because I'm a big fan of the Duel Monsters era. I talk about it all the time. I would likely be the target audience, but I'm not interested in this collection at all because it has nothing to do with literally reliving my childhood. It doesn't have to do with that. A lot of people, myself included, really miss GX, really miss 5Ds, really miss Duel Monsters, and we love that era, but that doesn't mean we want the same exact old game without even a basic reskin. It doesn't mean that I'm this perpetual boomer that got frustrated with growing up or something and just wants to relive my childhood exactly the way it is. It's not about that. And that's what Konami seems to think, that people like me that belong to this demographic of, individuals that love and miss the Duel Monsters era, that were stuck at some point of our childhood. And if you just re-release a game that was popular in our childhood, that we'll buy it, and that's what we want. And it's not. Me missing the Duel Monsters era has nothing to do with missing one specific game or missing a, time period of my childhood. It has to do with Duel Monsters just being amazing. It has to do with the pacing of the game. It has to do with the aesthetic. It has to do with the era of the game, the anime, the way the cards played and looked. It has to do more with that than, not growing up. I say that because a common argument from modern Yu-Gi-Oh players on my channel is that, oh, you just never grew up. Or I don't know, you just don't like anime or whatever. That's another one I get all the time. But the most common thing I hear is that, oh, it's time for you to grow up. The game has evolved and it looks different and it plays different. Grow up. You're like this old person that's just overly nostalgic about your childhood and you gotta move on. It doesn't have anything to do with my childhood, at least for the most part. It's actually a lot more simple than all that, and it really, at least for me, boils down to older eras of the game were just better in every single aspect. And that doesn't translate to let's just re-release this old-ass game without putting any effort into it and they'll buy it, they'll be happy because it's the quote-unquote era that they like or something, or it, satiates some sort of longing or nostalgia for the old game. That's not really it. What I would like to see is new games that use the original IP. I'm not asking for the same old games. I'm saying, use that era and make new games. Retro games are great. I love older games in general, but some of these old Yu-Gi-Oh games are just really, really rough. And if you're gonna re-release them, they need to truly be remastered and reskinned. Otherwise, I'm just gonna keep emulating them. I don't see a reason to spend, I think it's $50 for this, man. I think maybe 20 would be okay. But if you're gonna ask for me to spend $50 on games that are not even some of the best, in my opinion, of that era, at the bare minimum, I would expect these games to have gotten a serious facelift and a serious remaster, not just a re-release. I don't see the point. As I've said in a previous video, I would like to see new old Yu-Gi-Oh games. I would like to see new games that pay an homage to the original IP, or maybe GX or 5Ds or whatever. Games that maybe make use of that IP in that era, in those cards, but are new games. This trend in the gaming industry of just re-releasing old games and doing these crappy remasters that barely change anything, I think is just a dumb cash grab. You're not really understanding the point of what it is that people actually want. And this doesn't just apply to Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot of games that have nothing to do with Yu-Gi-Oh! And TCGs get remasters that are just pointless. And I think that most people don't necessarily want a remaster. There's just something about a specific game or a specific era that they like, and they would like to see that recaptured in newer games. And I think that most of these companies and developers are really not understanding what it is that people want. It's not about people wanting the same exact games re-released exactly the way they are. It's a lot more about there being something about a specific game or a specific time period that really resonated with people and that they miss. But just releasing the same game again with slightly better graphics, I don't think is what most people are looking for, because if it doesn't change enough, they're just going to buy the old version or emulate it, which I believe is exactly what happened here with Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days Collection, and that's why it didn't sell very well. It's not that there aren't fans of the original IP, which is something that people love to say that, especially modern players. Oh, nobody really misses old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Nobody misses Duel Monsters. Nobody misses 5Ds or GX. These are just people that have nostalgia, but given the opportunity, they wouldn't come back to the game. Like if the game got rebooted or Konami made a new game just for them, look at Rush Duels or whatever, you know, like they made that and people didn't come back to the game. So, you know, they're clearly people that just like to talk, but don't want to play. That is a very common argument that I hear. And my response to that has been now for multiple videos that they're just not really understanding what people want. I'm deviating of the topic here, but let's talk about Rush Duels again. Nobody asked for Rush Duels. You know, I miss the original IP of the game. I really miss old school Yu-Gi-Oh! And the way the game used to play, right? I'm the target audience for that. Rush Duels is not really what I asked for. It's not really what I think most people were looking for. Now, it just so happens that I do think it's fun. I have since given Rush Duels a genuine chance, and I actually kind of like it. It's not my favorite, you know, but in between regular Yu-Gi-Oh! And, you know, as an alternative to the current game, I think it's fun. There's nothing wrong with Rush Duels. It's just, I didn't ask for that. I don't know who asked for that. And it's the same thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days Collection. I don't know who asked for that or who this is for. I'm sure that there's people out there that did enjoy it, and I'm not knocking on those people. You like what you like. That's totally fine. And if this is exactly what you were looking for, great. I'm really happy that it did appeal to someone, but it didn't appeal for me. I'm not going to be buying it, and it makes me sad because I think that the response to the sales is going to affect how Konami does things going forward. When they seem to try to do different things or appeal to older players, like with Rush Duels or Speed Duels or now Early Days Collections and other things they might have done that I can't think of right now, it seems that these things are not very successful. It seems that Konami tries to bring back the old player base in different ways or give them something, and it's not very well received. And I really don't think it's a ungrateful child type of situation. It's really not, because I don't feel like that's the case for me. It's just that I didn't ask for this. I would like to see something like a new Yu-Gi-Oh! Tag Force game that doesn't involve Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s or something like that, or Arc V or something. I just want a Tag Force game that uses the old game, like a modern game that uses either the Duel Monsters era or the GX era or the 5Ds era, or blends them all together in some way, like a game like that, but a new game, not like a re-release of a game that I've been emulating for 10 years. Or at the very least, if you're gonna revamp a game, pick a good game. Like, can we get a re-release of, I don't know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Nightmare Troubadour, Yu-Gi-Oh! Spirit Caller or something like that? Those games are actually good. Re-release those games and give them an actual facelift. What a shock. This old-ass game that people haven't played in years, or if they do play it, they emulate, they're not gonna spend $50 on. Like, what a surprise. It's because you've put literally no effort into it. You didn't give it a proper revamp or a proper reskin or a proper facelift and remaster. If you're gonna do that, you really gotta be able to justify the price and really make the game look a lot better. It can't look exactly the same. Come on. And then they're going to turn around and say, well, look, we've given the players exactly what they want. We've given them old school Duel Monsters Yu-Gi-Oh! And they're not buying it. Well, you don't get it is the problem. The problem is that as a company, Konami's out of touch. They keep trying to do things, but they do it the wrong way. Like, I don't know who they're consulting with, but they probably need to hire new people. It's one of the reasons I make some of these little memes and series that I do, like making fun of Konami and how they probably come up with their ideas and stuff. It's because it just feels like a bunch of salespeople, a bunch of like corporate suits that have no idea what it is that people actually want. These are not people that probably grew up with the era or watching the anime. They just don't get it. To me, it's just disrespectful. I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but that's really what it comes down to. And I think that disrespect might be a little bit of a strong word to use here, but that's what it feels like. Straight up disrespect. It's like, here, dumb old boomer player that doesn't get the modern game and is stuck being nostalgic forever about the original IP and about your childhood. Here's the same game you used to play when you were 9. Now please consume product and give us your money. And it's like, no, I'm not going to, because you guys just don't get it. If you want a nostalgia pander and you want to recapture this old audience and make a game for them, that is totally fine. I would be the first person on the front of the line to buy that game. But it can't just be a crappy re-release of most of these games I never liked in the first place. Why not put actual effort and make a new game using that original IP that looks more like Tag Force or something like that? Something that's more modern. When I'm playing the game, I would like it to follow the actual rules of the game. And furthermore, I would like to actually be able to see what I'm fucking playing. I'd like to be able to see the art of the card and know what's on the board. Let's start with that. Very basic stuff. The bar is actually set so low with this stuff. I don't know how they keep failing. Like, you have such a dedicated and die-hard fan base that is willing to give you money for whatever it is that you put out, whether it's modern players or old players. The fan base for this game is so die-hard that the bar is set so low. So for a game like this to fail, you have to have really done no transformative change or done nothing of value. It's disrespectful. If you're gonna nostalgia pander, at least use the original IP and do something meaningful with it. Make an actual new game. Make a new Yu-Gi-Oh game, a new RPG that uses the original IP, or at least one of the original ones. Use 5Ds, I don't give a shit. Use GX, I don't know. Whatever era of the game it is that Konami chooses to go with, it doesn't really matter. I think it would sell good no matter what, as long as it's an actual new game. Look at the reasons why the Tag Force series was so successful. Look at why Nightmare Troubadour is considered such a great game. What makes that game so great and so special? Take that information and make a new game that takes advantage of some of these known, well-liked elements and make something new. I am sure that would be successful, at least a lot more successful than the early days collection that they released. I am not surprised at all that it failed, and I kind of saw it coming, to be honest. I will not be buying this game. I don't think you should buy it either. I think that Konami deserves to fail on this one. It's low effort, it's slop, and it's just straight up disrespectful. They just don't get it, and I don't think they're ever gonna get it, man.